Julien LeFort, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. I'm super excited for this conversation. Today, we're going to be exploring diversity, equity, and inclusion, but from a slightly different angle. We're going to be looking at it within the context of the relationship between resilience and diversity and inclusion. As we get started, I just wanted to share Julien's bio with everybody. For the past 15 years, Julien has worked with both nonprofit and for-profit organizations. Originally, he worked in a corporate environment, managing learning and development globally. His job was supporting people in their development as leaders and as individuals, creating programs that would make them shine as employees and make them grow and develop. After being forced to stay at work for a meeting, resulting in him missing an important event in his daughter's life and a feeling of being stuck in his work, Julien decided to make the shift to entrepreneurship. Now he's a successful coach, a trainer, a mentor, and coaches others and works with a range of truly amazing individuals, from coaches to creative entrepreneurs. It's a pleasure to have you. Anything else you would like to share by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in further?
I think that's a very good summary of the last few years of my life. But maybe the only thing I would add is in relationship to the topic we're going to talk about, especially around diversity and inclusion, is I've come from a very diverse background myself. So I have divorced parents, a mother that remarried, someone from West Africa, have an aunt from the LGBTQ community. I'm now married to a Romanian with two daughters now who speak 3 languages. So I think the topic we're going to talk about, I think, really bridges between 2 passions. One that is more of a professional passion, the resilience coaching, and what it is a personal passion, I think, which is the diversity and the inclusion side of it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And as we get into this, I think with your tremendous background, let's start by laying the groundwork for really the case for diversity and inclusion. And that's been talked about a lot. I've talked about it on this podcast before. I see there being a clear business case for it. I also see there being a clear human case for it. How do you make sense of that? Like, what is the value of diversity and inclusion for organizations, for teams, and for individuals? And then we can get into the connection with resilience.
Yeah, completely. So I think for me that you made a point that is very, very interesting, is that, and one of the reasons as well why I went into digging deeper into the relationship between the two, but diversity and inclusion specifically, is that when you Google search diversity and inclusion and benefits, you get a lot that is about the organization. And obviously you have got like the common ones, like it's going to improve performance, it's going to improve your revenue and so on. But there is actually very little out there which is about how does it benefit the individuals themselves. And I think for me, that's what becomes much more important, because ultimately, if we want to become more resilient, more inclusive individuals, what we need to do is to find what are the benefits for us as individuals. And for me, it always goes back to who we are as individuals and the connections that we are creating and our own needs and values. And I think that's the core of what I'm doing as well. It's linking that diversity and inclusion with what are those human needs that I have as an individual? What are those values that I have that are deeply ingrained? And how is that diversity and inclusion really helping me? And obviously helping the others around. And I think it has that kind of snowball effect afterwards towards teams and towards organizations as well. But I think ultimately at the core is the human being and the people of the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm all for, I think the human case should be all we need in talking about the importance of diversity and inclusion. But clearly there is a business case too. So even if you don't care about the human element and you're just kind of a cold-blooded, heartless capitalist and you just want to make money, it still makes sense to focus on diversity and inclusion. There's still a clear business case for it, and you're going to be better off. Your organization's going to be better off if you focus on these elements. And it continues to blow my mind that there are so many organizations that are just completely oblivious to this or just behind on this. I'm working with a client currently, that in their division, they have like out of 20 people, they have like one female, and they're currently doing searches to fill another position. And there's no females on the hiring committee. They're not even interviewing any females, even though I know for a fact that they have female applicants. And while I don't think they're blatantly sexist, I don't think they're like trying to like keep women out. I think there's just implicit biases at play. And if people can't pay attention to that and counteract it, you're going to be shooting yourself in the foot over and over again. And so that's what this client is doing. I think conceptually they get the importance of diversity and inclusion, but it's not moving into practice in any meaningful way yet. And they have a lot of work to do, frankly, and they're going to miss out on a whole lot of really good talent in the meantime. Okay, so with all of this as the groundwork for this, the importance, the business case, the human case for diversity and inclusion, I know you do a lot of work in talking about resiliency and the connection between resilience and diversity and inclusion. So tell us a little bit more about that and why that's an important connection to make.
Yeah, definitely. So my work actually started with resilience coaching. I've been doing that for like full time on my own for the last 4 years. And it's always been a topic that was very interesting for me. And actually bringing the diversity and inclusion added really a really valuable layer to it. Because what is interesting actually is that there is a correlation both ways. So the more diverse and inclusive you are, the more resilient you're going to become. But the more resilient you are, the more diverse and inclusive you're going to become as well. So I think there's a lot of work that can be done around that, because it's supporting each other really. And some simple things that we can look into. So if we look at resilience, and if I break it down into maybe like the 4 main areas, in my opinion, that are important behind resilience. One is what I call composure. So that's the kind of the control you have of your own emotions, of your environment. If you're more in control, what's going to happen ultimately is that you are able to be more open. You're more vulnerable, maybe. You're able to listen more to the people around you, which means when you have people from different backgrounds, you don't feel attacked or offended because someone is doing something different that doesn't fit into your own framework, into your own kind of personal culture. You're able to stop and really open your ears and say, okay, I want to hear what you have to bring on the table. Same as well, another element of resilience is confidence or self-assurance, confidence in my own abilities, and that interpersonal confidence that I have with others as well. Again, when I'm able to be more resilient, what happens suddenly is, and on the confidence side, I'm able to say, well, I'm not feeling, again, attacked by someone else who comes from a different background. Because when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we can talk about race, we can talk about sexual orientation, but it could be simply, I have someone who has 25 years more experience or 25 years less experience than me. How am I going to take it when they come over and they say, well, I have an opinion? If I'm feeling good and resilient and mentally tough, actually, that's probably the word, I'm able to say, well, I'm going to value that opinion the same way anyone else would bring it on the table. And vice versa as well. If I'm more inclusive, I'm going to start seeing as well the benefits for me as an individual to say, well, how do I become more performant? There is an amazing piece of research, actually, which you probably know about the forming, storming, norming, performing curve of teams. And there's an amazing piece of research showing actually how, well, the curve goes down deeply with more diverse teams, because it's more difficult at the beginning. It is hard. We're all bringing our differences and our individuality. And of course, we're going to have clashes. But actually, when we look in the long term at the performance, the curve goes, I don't know, tenfold in terms of performance. And I think that's what shows that that resilience here comes from that curve that goes down at the beginning, being able to
Yeah.
pass that and move forward from it. Otherwise, if we were not resilient enough to be able to enter that space, well, we probably would give up.
Yeah, that's a super interesting framing for diversity, equity, and inclusion. You're right, absolutely. So in that storming phase, every group, every team goes through it. But the more similar the group is, the faster they can move through that stage, right? And so people may think, "Oh, this is amazing, this is wonderful, and this is the way it should be. I want all my teams to be like this because look how fast we can become productive." But what they don't see is on the tail end, their outcomes are far less. They don't achieve as much. And so I really love the focus on resilience and grit and determination and just sticking with it. So even when you have people with vastly different backgrounds, experiences, perspectives, of course, that storming phase is going to be more challenging because you're trying to get people to trust each other and coalesce around a common vision and purpose. That just takes time, that takes energy, and you can't really shortcut it. You just have to do the work of it. But once you do that and you develop those relationships and you develop the trust, and people can work proactively together towards creating something, now you're going to be able to, you're just going to have so many better perspectives to create and innovate and really bring better products and services to market. So I love that connection with that theory and how you look at in the research you're talking about in relation to the correlation with resilience and diversity and inclusion. So
and one thing as well, sorry, I'm stopping. One thing I haven't mentioned necessarily in the resilience, in the different kind of domains of resilience, is one of them is that challenge side as well. So how do we take risks? And I think for organizations, what then people tend to forget is when you have really resilient and mentally tough individuals, they're going to take more risks. And it's true that risk means, well, we can fail, but if we're truly resilient, we're going to learn from these failures. But actually, when the risk is worthwhile, suddenly as well, again, the performance will multiply. We see it, I mean, we've seen it in the last 2 years. These organizations that have really gone through the pandemic strongly are the ones who've been able to take risk and say, we're going to do things differently. And the only way you can do things differently is because you have that group of people around you that is able to say, well, we're going to take that risk, but because we have all these experiences together, we're taking a calculated risk in some ways.
Yeah, and that calculated risk is going to not always pay off, obviously, otherwise it wouldn't be a risk. But if you put the time and effort into it, it definitely can pay off in spades in the long run. So I guess the question then is, how do we foster greater resiliency amongst teams as they're going through, that storming phase, as they're trying to coalesce so that we can foster, a really healthy, diverse and inclusive environment?
So I think the first thing I think that comes to mind, and it's not necessarily what is going to foster the resilience there, but it's more a realization that organizations and teams and leaders need to have as well is, as we said, it takes time. So patience, I think, is going to be a very important element here in that equation, because we need to take things one step at a time, and it's okay if it doesn't change fully. You mentioned when we have teams that are similar, we're going through that storming phase much faster, and it's not necessarily a good thing. So that patience is going to be very, very important, I think. The second thing as well is to think about, because it is about changing habits ultimately, and what is important there to become really sustainable in that growth, whether it's actually on the diversity and inclusion or on the resilience, is to really engage everyone into that learning, into that development, and leaders. So I think one of the things I want to say here is a lot of the time organizations rely on a group of people, often from HR specialists to DI specialists, to kind of run the whole thing. And it can only be sustainable actually if we truly have that buy-in from everyone in the organization, all the leaders that are going to actually push that forward. So I think that's another thing that is going to be very important. How do we bring those people on board? And again, link back to who they are as individuals. What are the benefits that it will give them as individuals to be able to move forward? And once we have that buy-in, then we can really start changing the culture and changing the habits. And one thing, again, that is very important is to have, I think, very, very simple strategies, not make it too complicated that people don't understand what they should be doing with themselves. One tool, for example, around resilience that I love using, I call it turning ants into pets. So ants is an acronym for automatic negative thoughts. Pets is for positive enabling thoughts. And it's how do you look at some of the experiences you've had, some of the challenges you've had, and think, okay, how do I turn maybe those negative thoughts that I have about that experience or about the goal that I want to achieve into things that are going to enable me? And that's a very simple exercise, but ultimately what happens is that people are starting to focus on the positive side rather than on the negative side, and everybody can do it. So some of these small exercises, how do you help people focus more maybe? How do you help people learn from some of the mistakes that the team has had and what we can do differently? Some of these small things actually are going to have a huge impact, rather than actually thinking, how do I run out at, I don't know, how do I roll out a gigantic program that is going to bring everything about diversity and inclusion and everything about resilience and change habits from today to tomorrow? Obviously, some of the work I do as well is around coaching, as we mentioned. I think coaching is an amazing tool for that. And that doesn't necessarily mean you need to hire someone as a coach. You can have leaders as well, really taking that role of leader coach, to be able to support their teams to grow through that change as well, because ultimately they're going to need that individualized and personalized approach, and the leader here needs to become that coach that is going to support them go step by step. While some will go faster than others might need a bit more time, and it's okay. So I think for me, these are some of the things that are important to keep in mind when we're developing that team resilience and ultimately individual resilience.
Yeah, I love it. All of that is really good. And I think it's important to recognize and remember that there are practical things that we can start doing right now, today, to make a difference. We can put processes in place, mechanisms in place to diminish the amount of unconscious bias that might be at play in our organization. I don't think most people walk around trying to be racist, sexist, homophobic, or whatever. I think most people tried to do right, and when they're making hiring decisions or promotion decisions or who's going to work on which projects, they're going to try to do it as fairly and objectively as they feel like they can. But we all have stuff going on in the back of our brains, the unconscious biases that shape so much of what we do. And so if we really want to be inclusive and we want to bring more diversity to the table, so we even have a chance at this resiliency in the team building that we were talking about, we have to put in place the mechanisms to allow for that to happen. Otherwise, we're never even going to get diversity around the table. And that's just a first step, right? So we have to think about the things we can do right now, today. Diversity and inclusion is hard. It's a sticky topic. It's a challenging thing, but we can't say that and then just use that as an excuse to really not put the time and effort into making a difference now. And so that's something I just want to hit home. Everyone listening, think about what you can do today in your organizations, in your teams, to improve the situation, so that you can foster greater inclusivity, and so you can foster the resiliency, the grit and the determination of your team to work it out and to get to the point where they're high functioning, high performing with the collective genius of all these diverse, different points of view. Well, Julien, it has been a real pleasure talking with you. I know at the time, and I'm going to have to let you go here in a few minutes. But before we close, I wanted to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can get connected with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Yes, definitely. Well, the best way to reach out is probably either through LinkedIn, so Julien LeFort, or directly through my website as well. My organization is called Future Minds, and the website is wearefutureminds.com. So they can find more information about the topic, obviously, on diversity and inclusion and coaching and resilience. But also you can reach out to me through that. You have links to all my social media accounts as well. So that's very happy to definitely connect with people. I have a couple of things I can send people as well. I have a beautiful diversity and kind of self-inclusion questionnaire that people can complete. I can send it to them if they want. If they want to figure out where they are and what is it that they're missing, because I think we are all more or less advanced in our journey. There are things we do well, things we do not as well. So I think it's a good way to see, well, where is it that I can focus a little bit more. So happy to share that with anyone who is interested as well. And yeah, I think probably the thing that I want maybe to leave everyone with, because you were mentioning about we can all do something. I think probably this very simple thing that we can always do, but I don't think we always do it very well these days, is to listen and to ask questions rather than come with, as you said, with all our biases and our experiences. I think sometimes just stopping and saying, I'm going to not say a word, I'm going to listen to the other person and maybe ask, what is it that I can do differently, is such a simple tool, but at the same time, such a powerful tool as well. I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, that is a wonderful place to start. Thank you, Julien. It has been a real pleasure. I encourage listeners to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Julien can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.